Boom. What's up, Apex Alpha Males? Anthony Dream Johnson here today again with The Dream Show. Today we're doing round two of an interview with GayLubeOil, author of The Pillars of Wisdom, the most extreme red pill alpha male book you'll ever read if you buy it, and you should buy it. There's a link. It's a very fat, thick, awesome book with real knowledge in it. Link in the description. You should go buy it. Some of you already did, I heard, and that was pretty cool. Keep buying it. Sell the shit out of this book. Share it with your friends everywhere you can. Very good book. So today is part two of the interview series with GayLubeOil, and let's welcome him back to the show. One of the most extreme red pill alpha males I've ever known.
Thank you so much for having me back. Thanks so much for believing me.
Yeah, man.
And you were saying that I was right all along.
Yeah, the
after
thumbnail,
all these years.
The thumbnail to this entire show is GayLubeOil was right. You know, that guy standing up in church or whatever.
Yeah, and boy, do I have to fight everyone over it. But yeah, here we are fighting. So
yeah, no, it's good, man. I mean, I found the old interview we did years ago, many years ago, like 8 years ago on my YouTube channel. And it's just kind of cool seeing us, way back in the day, back before the world went to even more shit. Trump just got elected. He was president-elect at the time. The red pill had not been quarantined yet and banned. A lot of the YouTubers hadn't been deleted yet. The world's changed so much since then. But you saw a lot of this, coming ahead of your time, way ahead of time.
I think Reddit was ahead of the game in terms of censorship, and then it rolled right into YouTube.
Yeah.
So we were kind of like a canary in the coal mine.
Yep. Yeah, Reddit is super, super lefty today. I mean, it's always been, lefty heaven, but it's even more so today, worse than ever.
Yeah. So
I'm surprised the red pill didn't even get deleted at this point. They're just left on quarantine forever, like purgatory.
What Red Pill School did is he played the game really well with the mods, where effectively he censors so much that nothing happens. And
Wow.
as a content creator, there's a thin line between no one caring at all and just boom, you're gone. So he went in the direction of nothing happens, and they want to be a prince of an empty kingdom. That's what's emotionally fulfilling for them. And if you look across the manosphere, everyone has their own private community where they declare themselves king, but it's empty.
Yeah.
And so he was ahead of his time even for that. I guess.
Yeah, I even seen some of your posts that are in the book actually were deleted. Like I think Women Want to Be Owned is one that I saw was deleted, probably by Red Pill School or whatever. Maybe a few others.
It's strange because you don't know what he you don't know what he deletes. You don't know what Reddit deletes. You don't know what he deletes. And he could go back in time and start deleting you.
Yep.
But the issue is there are personal conflicts and there's theory conflicts, right? And over time, all of these manosphere places become incestuous, and it becomes a purity spiral of who's. Let's talk about your convention, right? So you brought all those people together, which is a tremendous work, right?
Yeah.
And then Rollo wants to be king to the point of pushing you out. Once he's king, he doesn't care anymore. He's not going to be producing anymore.
And that's one of the main reasons we cited in the actual statement, like a 10-page document, were a lot of texts and DMs from Rollo, who spent almost 2 years trying to purity spiral my convention and actually boot out speakers. Even ones he had recommended that I bring in, well, he changed his mind. Now he wants me to get rid of them. Tanner Guzzi, AJ Cortez. He recommended Cuck Murphy. He said Cuck Murphy was red pill enough and he'd be a great addition to the convention. And a bunch of people like that, though. And he worked hard to, and no, this is, by the way, I worked with almost 200 speakers in the manosphere and otherwise, doctors and Navy SEALs and stuff. No one in my 18 years of building events tried like he did to boot out half a dozen to 10 speakers. I mean, this is really unusual.
Because if you read him, if you read 48 Laws of Power, if you read Machiavelli, right? That's his game. He wants to control the frame. What he doesn't understand is when you have absolute control of a structure, like let's say you're the man of the house or you're leading a political party. If it's all you're going to suck all the air out of the room and nothing will happen, right? So it's a balance between creating enough structure as a man and letting things flow organically. And they don't let anything flow organically, so all the air is sucked out of the room and it's just dead.
Now, when Reddit got quarantined when the red pill got quarantined on Reddit, That was like late 2018, I think. They built a
2018.
they built a new site because they had seen that coming for a while,
Right.
and a lot of it migrated then to trp.red. Now, are you censored there too, or do you get kind of free reign to post what you want?
Well, so what happens on trp.red, it's in order to move men forward, we have to go do difficult things, right? So
Yeah.
we have to physically stay in shape. We have to go out, interact with a bunch of crazy people, women, whatever. And then also we have to go read books. We have to find theory. We have to keep moving it forward, right? So there are people who want to wear a red pill badge and not do anything. And as soon as you go outside some parameters, it's over. Like they'll censor you. You have to deal with a bunch of dorks.
Yeah.
So in order to move any movement forward or do anything forward, you have to provide a certain level of newness. And
Now, by this, what do you mean by newness? Like discussing economics, BLM stuff, racial issues as it
everything.
applies, all that stuff?
Just you need to fuel the fire of interest with new. So you could go new in terms of new genres, or you could go current events. Realistically, you want to do both. But there's people who they say, "Oh, I held frame in front of my wife. I held frame in front of my wife," aka he ignored his wife, right? And so through that they suck out all new discussion, new people ever come, and there's no new collaborations that happen, right? So if you look at your convention, you brought in a whole bunch of people. Okay, some of them are crazy like Cuck Murphy, some of them are civilians to the manosphere, right? But regardless, it's a big mix, and out of that mix comes something, right?
Yeah,
Like,
one of our old speakers, the medical doctor, actually of 30 years, he said that at the convention, ideas have sex, and you basically have pollination of different ideas, people who agree on stuff but think of new ways to advocate for it, or just completely disagree. But it's that butting of heads and butting up of ideas that sparks like fires in a way in people's heads.
right. So if people are butting heads, Rollo can't be king, and he can't extract the maximum amount of money out of his subscribers, because
Yep.
a doctor could make him feel split or castrated, right? A lawyer can, any number of kind of specific professionals, right?
Psychologist Sean Smith really castrated him on Richard Cooper's channel. They had a debate, and Rollo just freaked the fuck out and demanded Rich Cooper kick Sean off the channel actually a couple years ago.
Right. So a beta male doesn't play to win; they play to not lose. And if you look at Rollo, he plays to not lose. And what he doesn't understand is there's many different ways of winning, right? So let's say he made friends with a psychologist, he could write a better book on the other side of that, right? If he made friends with a religious person, he could do the same thing. But in that moment, he doesn't want to lose. Now the toxicity is people copy Rollo. So now the manosphere is a whole bunch of Rollo clones who like, they might be against Rollo in words, but that's how they act, right? And so there's never going to be a new synthesis, and it's over. So one of the things that I discuss is there's a space, right? And a space can be heavily overcoded, right? Overcoded, which means that it only has one use, or it could be a liminal space where a lot of different things can happen in that space.
Oh,
right?
like a liminal order with Jack Murphy.
Well, Jack Murphy is so liminal. He transcends gender and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah,
So
he gets his erotic energy from a surprising source, you know?
He does get his erotic energy, but he never rolls it forward into anything. So ideally he would be a pervert somewhere quietly, and then roll his perverse energy into some kind of productive endeavor. I discuss perversion in my book. What you need to understand about perversion, it's a psychological type, is a pervert is a person who never got a paternal no. Their father never went up to them and said, "No, stop, gross, stop." And so a pervert has to keep going more until someone yells in his fucking face. And when you do yell in his face, he gets what he wants. So when Jack Murphy was surrounded and yelled at, that was like peak enjoyment, or Lacanian term, jouissance for him. So perverts will always push you to the brink of yelling at them.
You mean when he got exposed, so he enjoyed that in like a masochistic sense, is what you're saying? Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that, but that's a good point with him.
That's
Probably really
Freud,
did.
yeah. So that's why if you look at gay pride parades, they don't want acceptance. What they want is for people to start yelling at them and saying, oh my God, right? Because that's their sexuality.
So that's why they put a dildo on their head, basically. Yeah.
They will do anything until they get that paternal no. And that's straight up from Freud over here.
And then they go home and jerk off to it.
Right. Yeah. At that no.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Wow.
So they don't necessarily jerk off from the sexual act. They jerk off from your aversion to the sexual act.
Gotcha.
So they need you to see them. And so when you're dealing with a pervert, there's certain verbal things you got to kind of like throw the pervert onto someone else, because he's like a time bomb, right? So he's going to do it to someone. So just have him do it to someone else. That's my strategy. Okay. But
well, look, in today's show, I wanted to talk to you a lot about tradcons and bio boomers and the trad cucks, you know, within the context of the manosphere and beyond it. But the first question I really wanted to ask you that I honestly forgot last time, it's a very simple question, and it's, what color is your Bugatti?
Oh shit. I mean, if I have a Bugatti here, I'm gonna
Doesn't matter. You ain't got no Bugatti? I thought you were an alpha male, bro. What the
fuck? The local alpha males will put chrome to my dome and take that Bugatti. That's how it works here. I'm trying not to be flashy. And to that point, when you're flashy, you don't last that long in any space. You gotta make alliances, which I'm really surprised Tate never made. With all his money, he should have started buying off Romanian officials, NATO, Dubai.
I think he used to do a lot of that, but as he got bigger, I don't know exactly. At some point, they just fucking flipped on him. They flipped the fuck out. Like he rose too high, Icarus kind of thing, and it's, you know, soared too close to the sun or something.
You got to buy a roof, and you got to get some kind of.
I'm surprised he hasn't run to a non-extradition Muslim country. Like, I thought that's the reason he pretends to be a Muslim, but he's not Muslim. He's his own god.
He should have done that, or to like Russia, Belarus. He should have played that game, because they're gonna keep fucking with him.
Yeah, he needs to run. I'd run on foot if I were him at this point. Like, fucking do whatever, man.
Yeah, they're gonna get him.
Yeah, it's sad, man.
What was remind me again your question? Conservatives, right?
What color's your Bugatti?
Okay, yeah, my invisible Bugatti.
No, I want to talk about tradcons in the manosphere.
Okay, perfect.
So, for example, a lot of guys, this has been a thing in the manosphere space for like 4 or 5 years now, but also in conservative politics. You see homosexual porn stars like Sterling Cooper, who used to hang out with Tate a lot. He was one of his top lieutenants. You see other, chick porn stars literally are retiring from their escapades. Now they're born again Christians, right? Okay. All this kind of crap. You've seen this, I'm sure, many times. But in the manosphere too, you see guys. Rouge Fee was a great example. He was this master PUA who went out and slayed women around the world, and then he had this big, come to Jesus moment. He became an Orthodox Christian and this and that. But it's like these guys see basically the trad pill as like an escape valve almost to the harsh reality of women and today's sexual marketplace.
Okay.
So what are your views on that, like generally speaking?
Okay, so one is, gender is a performance. There's different ways we can perform gender according to our culture and according to our generation, right? So what is a strip club? A strip club is a place where men feel safe, right? So they get stressed out, and then they get to enact their gender roles, right? And that makes them feel safe and comfortable. So you could consider pornography and strip clubs to be a conservative space where people enact behaviors that they're comfortable with to feel safe again, if that makes sense, right? So if you go to a conservative convention, actually, at the end of the Republican convention, they all go have gay sex, and then the few that aren't homosexuals, they buy strippers and prostitutes, right? So you have to understand that it's like degenerate sex and then Jordan Peterson daddy talk, they're two sides of the same coin. As soon as they're done jerking off, they need a priest to make themselves feel better. And that's
so they jerk off in their mom's basement, and then their penance is to go clean the room from
or to hear that responsible Peterson voice that reassures them.
Okay.
Right. So, and it's going to be the same thing. And if you know any strippers or porn stars, they're going to lord over those conservative meetings like vultures, just waiting for their money.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. This is real too. Like a lot of Republicans are gay, homosexuals. Like Jesse Lee Peter is one of them, a reverend, a pastor on YouTube, and he loves big Mexican dicks in his mouth.
Because in order to be a homosexual, you need a paternal injunction, right? So most homosexuals are perverse, which means they're looking for someone to yell in their face, "Yo, that's disgusting. What are you doing?" Okay. So, but who's going to do that? A conservative or a fake conservative. So they kind of need each other, right? Conservative is a paternal prohibition, and a homosexual desperately that's what he wants because he didn't get it as a child, right? So you're all like in the US, you're gonna see that connection. That's number one. The next thing is what you have to understand is, so there's something called dialectic materialism, which is to say that our behaviors come from our economic system, right? So the old, I work on the railroad. That's like an industrial capitalism. So if you look at our great grandparents, they act a certain way, right? Then there's Aaron Clarey, right? Aaron Clarey is an expert at shamming at his job in a late 90s office space kind of genre. So he has those ethics. And then finally there is a jinxie zoomer streamer ethics, right? So how we act comes from what economic system we're in, right?
You made a great point in your book, and we talked about it just before we went live. Guys today talk about the sexual marketplace and how much dating has changed, and there are real changes that men have seen, whether it's OnlyFans or Tinder and crap like this. But a couple hundred years ago, there was no such thing as dating as we know it, not even close. There wasn't free association. You couldn't go do, whatever you want. The girl you wanted was owned by her father, and if you got her, you're going to get sheep and shit with it along with her. It's changed so much.
Dating starts with the abortion pill, right? So once the abortion pill happens, that's when women have the freedom to date.
You mean birth control or the actual modafinil abortion pill?
All of it.
Okay.
So it really starts because the problem is once a woman has kids, it's over, it's done, right? So, but if she can have sex and not get tied into children, then she can go through and buy you as a man as a commodity and constantly roll. So dating will start whenever women have access to abortion or birth control pill.
So you're saying today's dating basically traces back to the 60s is where the origin point.
Right. So 60s big cities, and then from there it's going to spread inland, right? So you have the coasts in the US, right? And then it's going to go in like that. But what conservative masculinity is if you want to be a masculine man, if you want to win, let's say with you, right? You were ahead of the game. You put together a convention. You were early on it, right? I think you're also pretty early on YouTube. So if you're early on something, you're going to make a lot of money. You'll have enough money to create a family or create whatever socio-political structures you want, right? What the conservatives are looking for is they have a lot of anxiety. And the same way that you might go to your grandmother for a soup that makes you feel comfortable because it's something that you're used to, by them LARPing as something it's an emotional safety blanket. So conservatives are looking for an emotional safety blanket by reenacting the masculinity of their grandparents that made sense in their grandparents' economic system, but right now doesn't work. Or it will only work in some weird rural whatever, which is economically behind.
And so this is why you see guys, even now in the age of OnlyFans hookers and Tinder sluts and all that, they still buy girls flowers. They're super nice, even if it fails 100 times in a row. So yeah, they're like you're saying, they're enacting the masculinity of their grandfathers that might have sort of worked 100 years ago, but it's not even remotely applicable today, and they don't get it.
If you get a girl flowers, then she can take those flowers back to her family because she lives in a coherent family unit. And from there, she's going to talk about your fitness as a male with her sisters and her mother, right? That structure doesn't exist. So yeah, flowers make sense in the 1950s, right? So a lot of the behaviors that people consider beta were completely viable behaviors in their time period, right? So I don't know. There's a clip from Mystery recently. I know he really innovated a lot, but in my opinion, right now he's not doing too good.
Yeah.
And he's like, go up to a bartender and be like, it's sad that I can only talk to you at work. So the thing that's allows me to meet you is the thing that's spreading us apart. And I'm thinking, like, that's not a pickup line. You're not in a good spot emotionally, right?
Have you
So
seen his Instagram stuff lately? It's like
I'm
this.
afraid to look.
It's bad. He sounds like he's done too many drugs or something, or he sounds like he's had serious cognitive decline. Like he's getting slower and he sounds really weird. And I say that as someone who is a millennial. I kind of looked up to him when I found the game and I found the Manosphere and PUA back in 2005. And now I look at this guy and I almost pity him. And I don't want to, but I do.
Is he pushing 50?
Like, probably. He's pretty old. He's got to be in his late 40s.
I think he has to, like, you have to know how old you are and do the thing that's cool for that age. Like, I don't know, like, go be a landlord or something. You know what I mean? Like, take your money and go be a cool 40-year-old. Stop. You know the meme of the guy, like William Dafoe with a skateboard, like, oh, how's it going, kids?
Oh, yeah. That's not William Dafoe, though.
Sorry.
That's another guy. I don't know his name, but it's not William Dafoe, that's for sure.
But same thing with Rolo. Like, you look at him, like, you see, like, a 60-year-old guy surrounded by prostitutes. It's like,
and he looks transgender on top of that.
Go be 60. Go, I don't know. Like,
I've actually been thinking that there's a number of Manosphere guys I know. There's obviously the Fraud Father, Rollery. There's a guy I like, a friend of mine, Elliot Hulse. There's Michael Foster, is another Manosphere kind of Christian pastor. And those two are a bit younger. They're both in their like mid to late 40s or whatever. Rollo obviously is like about almost 60, but they're all going to become grandfathers soon. They all have daughters who are almost 20 or almost 20 or a post 20 and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, like, those two guys, Elliot Hulse and Michael Foster, they're like very pro patriarchy, each in their own respective denomination of Christianity that they're like really devout with. One's Protestant, one's Roman Catholic. But they're going to slide into these roles of grandfatherhood really well, I think. And it might be a little bit unnerving to watch their kid have a kid, but beyond that, they're really going to embrace this and in a proactive and useful way. The Fraud Father Rollery, I think, is going to fucking freak out. Like, when his kid has a kid, he's going to absolutely have a public meltdown because he resents the role of fatherhood in the first place, much less grandfatherhood, which is like fatherhoodception. So I think he's going to really just melt down with this, even worse than we've already seen, where he looks like a transgender.
In order to be successful in a role, you have to start preparing before it's time, right? So in a sport, you have to train before, or like, you built up to your convention, or we built up to this podcast, right?
Yeah.
What's gonna happen with him is he's gonna hit that certain point and he's gonna run off. And so I've had clients who the grandfathers don't even talk to the kids. They're just gonna run off and act like it didn't happen. So
a lot of boomers do this.
They don't. The boomer doesn't acknowledge his age. And that's why if you look at the drugs that are sold to the boomer, they're drugs that help him feel as if he's not old. He should play into it.
Yeah.
But so I guess what I would say is, one, we're mortal. So you need to act your age. You need to be cool for your age. That's one. Two, I would say, is what is masculine changes depending on what decade we're in. And also, you should also act your culture, right? So there's a lot of Indian men who try and act white, and it's this weird imitation of white, and it's not good for them. And it's like, well, go be Indian, go be a cool Indian, whatever that means.
I saw you talking about this on another podcast you just did, or interview you posted. These Indians, I didn't know they were obsessed with white culture, but that makes sense because they were colonialized and stuff.
Yeah, it's a mess. But I guess to really harp on conservatives, you have to understand that whenever there's anxiety, they're going to be looking for an explanation that makes them feel good. Yeah. Right. So a lot of these conservatives drink, and you can see it on their face. They have a weird bloated face. Like if you look at Vance, the vice president.
Yeah. He looks like a drinker.
He looks like a drinker. He has the body of a drinker, right?
He's puffy. puffy face.
It's like a face on top of a face, right? So they're looking for a certain kind of anesthesia. And so what I want to push a dynamic masculinity of let's go out ahead of everyone, figure out how we're going to make money, figure out what the next fucking thing is, and then make money as hunters effectively instead of holding on to some kind of idol pretending that it's the 1980s. And so if you look at, let's say, the Biden administration, right? They're going to say, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. The economy's fine. And then they're going to be like, oh, well, we lied about the numbers. Don't worry about it, right?
Yeah.
So
unemployment's actually good and inflation is actually good. Fuck it. So it's okay. It's actually better than that you're broke.
Right. So
yeah.
What you're going to see is they're going to lie for as long as they can. If you look at Fresh and Fit, they're going to keep lying, like with their weird like prostitute boat.
Yeah.
And then they're going to run off and pretend it never happened.
Yep.
So I would say the key to masculinity is to be proactive, not reactive. And in order to do that, we have to go gather new information. We have to go read books. We have to go read books we disagree with, try and figure out compromises, new ideas, so we can navigate, right? So the real attack on conservatives is this kind of sheltered behavior.
Well, they're always trying to cling on to something rather than build anything new. Your book has talked about this in a couple different spots, but they're never like, they don't have anything for after the revolution. They don't really want anything other than to hold on to what was for as long as they can until it inevitably dies anyway. Like, what's the point of this?
So let's talk about some conservatives, right, who are doing a good job, right? So if you look at the Dubai and the Saudi princes, right, they're religious. So in that sense, they're conservative, right? They have their oil money, okay? And you can see how they're trying to roll that oil money into a new Dubai or into a new Middle East, right? And we could have done that, right? Like we were in Iraq, we could have stole all of Iraq's oil, and the U.S. could have been a Dubai if we spent all that oil money here, right? So just because you're conservative doesn't mean you're defensive, because the Middle East is doing just fine. It's not, and so why can't we have that? I don't know. I'm mad at Dick Cheney for not robbing Iraq of all of its oil. I think
you're mad at Dick Cheney for not being Dick Cheney enough.
I think if he robbed Iraq of all of its oil, right, and then we had cheap energy prices, America could have had very powerful manufacturing on the back of cheap energy prices, and we could have a rich middle class, right?
Well, America has a shit ton of oil anyway. We just don't use any of it. Trump was the only one who did anything about it.
Well, so let's use our oil, and then let's go steal Iraq's oil. I mean,
Biden did use all the oil. He used it to lower the gas prices with the strategic oil reserve. Now it's all gone.
It just feels like the U.S. invades a country. They kind of linger around like an alcoholic father, or a Rolo, which is the same thing, and then they kind of scamper off. But what I would say is, like, if you're there, then do it, right? And kind of like if you go back to the red pill, like everyone kind of shows up to feel important. They never actually do their job. They never like, yo, here's some fucked up shit. Hey, like, let's go piss off the Reddit admins. Hey, let's go piss off our own constituents by writing a how to measure your dick article, right? So if you're in a role, you got to go do the role. And we only, like, as a man, right? Like, you only have that role for so long, right? You're only father for so long. You're only grandfather for so long, right? You're only manosphere speaker for so long. So knowing that it's a limited performance, you got to sprint, right? Like, it's like when we go to the gym, right? Push yourself really, really hard for an hour and then go do whatever. But if you look at gym betas, right? They show up and they kind of linger around there, like, I know I'm hitting Rolo in the face all over, hitting Rolo, and then Donovan Sharp, the black kid who copied his homework.
Donovan Sharp.
He just kind of like, you ask him a question and he's just like,
yeah.
He has this constipated face.
Yep.
And that's...
And he'll talk 10 times over saying the broken record, not even copying the fraud father's homework. He'll go like, guys, listen, guys, listen. We're gonna talk about it, okay? Listen, all right, guys. I mean, the guy, it's not stuttering necessarily like the fat Fresh and Fit guy. he has like a more
Right.
legitimate stutter for some reason. But Conovan is like gets hung up on a word in his head, and he just says it 1,000 times in a row, and then like 10 minutes later he moves on to like something else, or he spazzes out and starts constipating his face on
But
camera.
but the point is that these people exist because of their audience, and
Mhm.
they exist to make their audience feel good.
Yeah, this is what
To
I wrote about this in my newsletter recently, like
right.
a month or two ago, that all these beta males are like women essentially, and all they care about is their feelings, and whoever can tickle those feelings and poke those
Exactly.
feelings, and it's pathetic. It's not manly, it's not masculine, it's not alpha, it's not anything useful for being a man. It's gay. It's the most effeminate way to live is just to follow your emotions around like a fucking chick all day.
So what I'm saying is like, okay, like let's say I figure out a new tax structure for you, right? Where like I'm like, hey Anthony, right now your tax structured like this, okay? But if you went to the Cayman Islands and you did this, I could save you 20%, right? So the best way for me to help you as a man and for you to help me as a man is to create anxiety, right? If I would call you, I'd be like, yo, what the fuck are you doing? You're paying an extra 20% that you don't need to fucking pay. Fly over right now, go meet this sketch ass lawyer. Let's restructure, dump this money, and then we'll move it through whatever banks, right? So and then in that moment for the next, let's say 6 weeks, you'd be flying around filing paperwork. It'd be an absolute fuck show, right? It's called growing into pain, right? So, or like in bodybuilding, right? You lift, no pain, no gain, right? No pain, no gain in terms of musculature, no pain, no gain in terms of finance, right? And you're someone who grew very quickly financially. So, as soon as you're hearing this kind of reassuring voice and not an anxiety voice of like, oh, fuck, like I'm completely wrong and everything's been wrong, that's how you know you're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, but 90% of beta males I find, and you've found similar, I'm sure, in the manosphere, they knee jerk react to anything abrasive like this, and they tend to run away. They're like happy slaves that don't want to leave the plantation. They're happy sheep to keep being a sheep and go in circles and circles and circles around.
I
And it's
think
almost grown like a cancer, I'd say, over the past like 10 years or so in the manosphere, maybe 15.
you have to give the betas what they need, which is kind of authoritarian, and not what they want. You can cater to them and you can actually make more money, right?
Yeah.
I think I know I did. I'm pretty sure you did. I spoke about the pandemic early on,
Yeah.
early on, and I was like, "Yo, like, fuck, this shit's fuck. Get the fuck out of the country. Like, move, right?" And they're like, "The pandemic has nothing to do with dating," and I'm like, "So spikes protein that builds up in your genitals has nothing to do with dating? Like, what are you talking about, right?" But in that period of lockdowns, elections, there were a lot of big moves that people could make, right?
Yeah.
Financially, all sorts of stuff, right?
Yep.
And they just kind of they froze. And that's when a lot of podcasts came out for the explicit purpose of making beta males feel better.
Yeah.
So
I mean, look at the Fraud Father, for example. He was trying to kill off my convention by siphoning out speakers and creating a Red Man Summit. That didn't work. So he made a Rule Zero Summit that was supposed to happen in 2020. They sold tickets to it in a very strange way, where each speaker sold 20 tickets, or they had 20 tickets to sell. Then, of course, and there's video of this. I have it downloaded and it's still on his channel, The Fraud Father. In late July, like July 30th, 31, and 2020, the Fraud Father cancels this Rule Zero Summit that's supposed to happen in Las Vegas. It's supposed to happen in October or September or something like that. And they keep all the money. He said, there's no refunds, but we're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you. So what does that mean? That means they just did jerk off Zoom calls and kept all the money and didn't do the event that they promised to do. And then going forward, he never tried to do another event again. He did try to puppet Conovan to do these little shitty events, but the Fraud Father never really got involved with any of it directly. And he just went into podcasting full time to keep these betas at home, manipulate their feelings, manipulate their pain, and siphon money out of their wallets. And that's all it was, is just a money grab. And stay home and jerk off and super chat on YouTube.
Rule Zero on the red pill was a rule that they said keep it focused on sexual strategy.
Yeah.
Right. So anything like, well, obviously politics has an effect on sexual strategy because a lot of times, we're too right wing for women. Right. Or you could say the medical tyranny has an effect on sexual strategy. Or I could say what country you're in. Right. Geo arbitrage or economics. So when they say Rule Zero, it's a repression. They're saying, let's talk about only the topics I want to talk about. What I believe should have happened with the convention is you get all these men together, you have different ideas, and then it should be a jumping off point for putting the ideas together in a new way. That's what I had a very small team. I did it with my book, right? So like, let's roll it forward. But you can't roll things forward if you're a king who wants to jerk off in his own fucking face all the time. Yeah. So I guess that.
Well put. Talk to me a little more about, these trad cucks in the manosphere and stuff. You mentioned alcoholics, for example. A lot of these guys are heavy drinkers. Conservative politics and in the manosphere, it's very similar. I know a few guys, married red pill kind of guys, family beta male kind of guys, who are, lifelong alcoholics on and off. More famously, a patriarch, Ryan Mickler from the Order of Cuckolds. He's got a lot of fans. He's got 100,000 followers on Instagram, 200,000 on YouTube, kind of thing. This guy was an alcoholic, or is an alcoholic. Got busted by his wife a long time ago. So he's admitted all this on his Twitter and his Instagram and stuff. And then he said he was going to stop drinking. And he's a Mormon, by the way, so it's against his God, against the word of his God to drink in the first place, right? So then he pretends to not drink for many years with his wife and his 4 kids. And surprise, a year ago, she catches him that he's been drinking the whole fucking time behind her back. There's a lot to break down there because it's interesting to be this, Giga Chad patriarch on the internet. And then meanwhile, your wife is running the show. You're scared of your wife. You're hiding. You're pouring vodka in a water bottle to drink behind your wife's back the whole time. She catches you and divorce rapes your ass.
What state is this? Utah, probably, right? Something like
that. I think he lives in Utah now, but they moved. He used to live in Utah. Then they moved to the East Coast of the United States, like Maine, I think, or something. Then they moved back though.
I think like what is an American culturally? Like if we're going to speak favorably about America, like the best Americans are cowboys. They push the frontier, right? And so there's the big question of what happens when an American hits his frontier. And you notice that cowboys start drinking when there's no more Indians to shoot. So
he's a combat vet too. So
he's a combat vet, right?
Yeah.
So when he's in combat, he's pushing a frontier. We can agree whether that's right or wrong frontier, right? But the big thing is there's tremendous potential in these conservative men, but they don't do anything. So if he started a ranch in Latin America, if he kept pushing the frontier in some way, he wouldn't have the opportunity to drink, right? So I would say first there's a symbolic death where you don't push the frontier anymore. Then, because you're castrated, you're not pushing forward, there's an anxiety, right? Then they're going to self-medicate that anxiety so they could feel like a man again.
Yeah.
So I would say that whenever, like, if you look at a very powerful animal like a lion or a tiger, right, and they don't have their room to push, they're going to start pacing that cage. And then beyond that, if it's a person, a lot of people in jail start doing drugs, right, to medicate. So if you really are a high power male, you need a frontier. And if you don't have a frontier to push, you're going to die or you're going to drink yourself to death. My book also talks a lot about drugs. So I guess if you have that drive, if you repress that drive, it's over. And
almost like you're going to, like you said, the tiger pacing a cage, almost like you're going to cannibalize yourself with the anxiety. And maybe that's why they're medicating it with the alcohol and stuff.
You'll feel it. And so, like, I was a personal trainer, and I think a lot about this. You can really feel it in people. Like, if you go up to a person, you're like, "Hey, dude, I think your tricep is tight," right? You can see that this guy's really tense, right? So you can feel it. Like, one, you can try and read someone. That's really hard, but you can feel it in their body. So these conservatives have to push the frontier. What I'm worried about the American man is they're not pushing the frontier and they're going to suffocate. If you look at Europe, right, it's over. Europe is over. Europe's been over. Western Europe is done. Where the Western European masculinity podcast, it's over. They don't push the frontier. They say, I have a small apartment. This is good enough to barely afford a family. I don't need anything more. And I'm like, dude, like I could put money in your bank account. What are you talking about? no, I'm fine. So
Well, now they're
America's
inviting all the Africans and the Muslims in. I mean, they're going to be speaking, Farsi pretty soon at this
if
rate.
the Europeans have such a reservation about having kids, and I had this conversation probably 2 days ago. I was like, look, like, don't wait for the perfect moment, just go for it, because the global south isn't. The global south is just pushing, right? But Western Europe is done. It's completely cooked. And you're gonna see like a Muslim Europe, and I don't know, maybe you're gonna see like a Tunisia there or something.
You think we'll see another European civil war? Like, I know French generals put out a huge letter not too long ago, maybe a year or two ago, that France might end up in a civil war. Obviously, Europeans love killing each other every 50
But
years or
like,
something.
to have a civil war, you need men in their 20s fighting. And so the white population is just so old that they're not aggressive anymore. You're just going to see new races, right? So the same way that British people are Anglo-Saxon, you're gonna see the emergence of completely new races and cultures. Like what is an American, right? It's a mix of a whole bunch of different Europeans. So you're gonna see this new blend. It's done. I'm saying this because I speak to Europeans. There's no drive. If you look at Eastern Europe, maybe more, but once again, like, you're going to see different races emerge because the native white populations, they're just not having enough kids. And not only are they not having enough kids, they don't want to have kids. And when you bring up the conversation, it's just not something that they strive for, right? So
yeah, it's really hard to light a fire in a man's soul. If he doesn't want it, you can bring the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Yeah, these men you're right. I mean, a lot of these men are really, really cucked by the millions. And I had an old neighbor. You'd find this interesting to some degree. I had an old neighbor not too long ago, and he was Colombian, but his wife was this white girl, just some fat, chubby, millennial white chick. And I was like, why don't you guys have kids, man? And he's like, oh, well, we might adopt, da, 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 da. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, that was really weird to me. There's two young people in their 30s in America. And even though he's from Colombia, he's lived in the US for a while. And he's like, yeah, we want to adopt because we don't want to feed into overpopulation. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, who believes this nonsense? And the reality is, a lot of people, they love state propaganda. And a lot of it probably came from his wife. I didn't have to go ask her to figure that out. But it was just so bizarre to hear someone who was actually married, had a house, owned it, and all this stuff, and they just won't have kids because they don't want to feed into overpopulation. So they're going to adopt. Like, what the fuck?
Well, what I would be suspicious of is, okay, so from what it sounds like, perhaps his wife's in control in this relationship, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now if he has a kid, right, she's going to use that kid to say, well, the kid needs this, the kid needs that. And through that, she can gain more control over the house, right? So then he's going to lose more influence. Then at some point, he has to send the kid to school. Or if you're super conservative, you're going to homeschool. I don't think this guy's going to homeschool.
No, that's what we're doing with my daughter.
Right. So, make sure you have all the materials. But what I'm saying is, like, I think he has enough freedom space for himself that he carved out for himself. And as soon as he has a kid, that's going to get completely demolished. And he's going to be living in a feminine home, and the values of the school are going to roll back into his house. Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a kid, you need to have a kid in a culture that's going to support you and how you want to raise your kid. So you're not fighting. You can only fight for so long. Eventually you're going to get burnt out. Right.
Willpower is a finite resource. Yeah.
At some point, like, let's go back to the pandemic, right? Everyone would come at you to tell you to go poison yourself. Right. Mm-hmm. And so,
you're right. I was one of the few guys. I mean, I lived in Florida at the time, so this wasn't as big of a deal to me. You were in California, I guess. That must have been a shit show.
It was a huge shit show, and it felt like Dawn of the Dead, where everyone's coming at you all at once.
So, dude, in the middle of the pandemic, I was still, banging chicks off Tinder. I was still going to the beach. I was still going. My friend owned his own gym. That's where I would work out anyway.
Nice.
So I just kept going to the same gym, even though the gyms were otherwise closed. And since I always work from home on 21 Studios and stuff, my life had very, very little change to it. And I would go into stores that wearing a mask too, and people would freak the fuck out until the governor eventually put an end to that. But it was a lot of fun, actually. I had fun walking into stores and restaurants without a mask, and people like getting scared and shit and chasing me around. I got chased around a Sprouts one time by three
Oh, that's
women,
fun.
two black women and a Spanish chick.
That's fun.
And yeah, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun being able to, like you, like to cause trouble, radicalize these people and stand out like that. Fun.
What I want to point out is that whole pandemic, no one remembers it. Like, it's as if it never happened. Like, I think culture,
like a trauma amnesia almost for people.
there's a trauma amnesia around the pandemic, and everyone acts like it never happened.
Yeah.
But what I'm worried about is they're just going to do it again.
Yep.
So the danger of having kids is now you're glued to a place because your kid needs that stability, and you can't just get up and leave. So I think a precursor to having a kid is being in a place you're comfortable with, being in a community you're comfortable with, because the child labor, the work you need to raise your kid is so high. You need the help of the community, right?
Now, have you bred any big booty Latina bitches yet, or how's that going?
Man. Oh, on my front. Okay, so to be completely honest, so here there's a caste system, right? And so there's women who are like indigenous, biracial, and white. And so like for me, like
but they're all considered Mexican. You're saying
they're all considered Mexican, but there's a, like Europe, right? Parts of Europe, there's a huge class war going on. So if you're with a woman who is Mexican, she's with you as a status symbol. So you're like a purse, right? So I went through that. I'm kind of bored of it. For me, I've been with a lot of expat women, not a lot, but some. And that's really interesting because if you're a white woman in Mexico, no one's going to call you out, right? Because our Mexican's going to go up to a white woman and say like you're completely out of it. No.
Is there a lot of Jew women down there? I've seen a lot of Jews when I was traveling throughout South America. The chicks specifically.
So in Merida, Cozumel, they sell jewelry and makeup to the cruise ship boomers. So there's a lot in that spot. And then Israelis take a gap year. And when they take a gap year, they're going to push through. And so I guess with them, there is Orthodox Jews who are going to just try and replicate their religion. And then there is like an Israeli party girl.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to be that different from any European woman. But I would say that, to go back to your question, with a Mexican woman, first it's fun in dating, and then she's going to figure out, okay, like how do I fit this gringo into my culture? And that's going to be the big thing. And if you can fit, or if she can fit you properly, then you can have a relationship, right? And then with the white women, the expat women, they're just rolling through Mexico trying to find themselves. And I've had a conversation with them, and I'm like, listen, like, I know you want to date a white guy. I know that's what you want. This is hard, and you're going to have to figure out how to anchor yourself. And they're like, well, I'll figure it out when I'm 30. And I'm like, you're not. Trust me, you're not. And then they'll say, well, you don't know me. And I'm like, maybe I don't know you, but I talk to a whole bunch of women at cafes, and I know how this ends. Believe me. And they're like, yeah, whatever. So there's a kind of destiny that you can't fight. I'm like, I could take her by the hand and say, okay, let's go to an expat cafe and let's go talk to 30-year-old version of you and see how she's been drinking beers. She doesn't have a stable life. Like, she's all over the place. She's scattered. She has weird mystical tattoos.
She's got chlamydia.
Maybe. I mean, I haven't checked, but
probably.
Thank God I haven't checked. But the point is, like, in a way, you can't save women from their destiny of saying, like, okay, like, here's your behaviors. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. But here's someone who did your behaviors for 5 years. Let's go talk to her and tell me if you want to be her. Like, that level of self-awareness, they're not going to do. To be honest with you, like, same thing with expat men. If you're an expat you need to figure out a way how to integrate into domestic culture. So whatever social class you are, right, you need to hang out with high level Mexicans and start getting friends here so you can be part of the society, because floating around for too long isn't good. And the people who I've seen who floated around, like mostly from expat cafes, they don't look good. They look like a Rolo. Rolo is
Mm.
someone who floated around for too long. I would say it's cool to float around to find yourself, but it's like buying a house, right? Float around to find the house, buy the house, decorate the house, have kids in the house, become a grandfather. You gotta know when to commit and roll forward. So, yeah,
Kind of off-brand question, but
sure.
do you identify as a white guy or a Russian guy, or how does that work exactly? Like, if you shave your beard and put a hat on, you could definitely pass as like, full-blooded white,
Um. So,
because you have some Muslim in your blood or something like that. You said last time.
well, so what I would say is, having been around Americans, I'm more group oriented than them, right? So culturally, I would say I'm Russian. I get along with Russians
Mm.
and Eastern Europeans.
You speak
So
Russian?
yeah, I speak Russian and I have a
Mm.
Russian name, and so I guess at a distance I can come across as American, but like if you lived with me in my house and you're like, hey, yo, like you have all of your meals, you have it with your company. Oh, you do everything as a group. You know what I mean? Like that Americans are used to a greater degree of independence.
Mm.
And for them, like that is suffocating. So I guess if you look at my book, it's a Russian person expressing themselves in English, and that's why it's so harsh. Other Russian books are that aggressive, especially from, let's say, high test men. So
Yeah, even Ayn Rand, a lot of people said she was one of the best men they ever knew. Just because of the way she wrote, being so aggressive and so brutal.
I think what's interesting, I have Ayn Rand right here. I don't know if you saw right here.
Which books? Which ones you got there?
You got Atlas Shrugged.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah. So I put that there for you. But so the point being is, Ayn Rand was in the middle of a big economic transition,
Hmm.
right? Right when they start building those railroads, right? So what I would say is
Well,
kind of
she
like
watched the bloody revolution in Russia, man. Like, she was 10 years old. She saw this shit going down.
okay, so why did the revolution happen in Russia? It's because the industrial logic of the railroad came to Russia, and the logic of industrial production came to Russia, and the Bolsheviks were able to use that technology to get rid of the czar. So what I'm saying is there's the fourth industrial revolution, and conservatives, instead of sitting on their ass, need to figure out, how is this automation going to work? What is there in this fourth industrial revolution that they can use to roll forward as a class? So that's for me, like that's the real red pill. Like, what are these new technologies and how can you be first use on them? I know we kind of pivoted.
Yeah.
And there's an expat component, there's a gender component, I think there's a paternal component. Where
Oh,
yeah,
something we talked about alcoholics. I forgot to add this in. I think you'll
perfect.
appreciate this. The alcoholics. I talked about the Ryan Mickler guy. I found out reading his bio the other day. I'm preparing a newsletter,
Okay.
exposing this guy as you might imagine. So apparently, not only is he this secret alcoholic who got busted by his wife just fucking divorced him and all this crap. His mother married his father, who was an alcoholic, drank like a fish until she finally divorced him too. So what I realized is there might be some sort of GayLubeOil Oedipus complex thing you might talk about, where he became the man his mother loved to fuck, who was his alcoholic father. Do you have any
They
thoughts on that?
they there's I think like when you talk to Mormons, they want to be a stoic alpha, right? They have a very rigid definition of what masculinity is. And as the economy changes, you're going to have to be a different type of man. I had a client, his father was a VCR salesperson. I guess he never sold DVDs and he just threw himself in front of a train, right? So if you don't adapt with the economy, you're going to die, right? So in the time of Ayn Rand, all the European nobility didn't adapt to the new railroad. And so they're done. So what I would say is like I with some people it's alcohol, with some people it's fentanyl,
Yeah.
and so there's the life that they want, and then there's the life that they have, and they make up the difference with drugs. And from running your convention, it's always going to take much, 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 much more than what you think you need, right? So I worked my ass off publishing this book. Now I have to go on every single podcast, right? So I have to do much, much more. So don't fill that gap with drugs. And the problem is when you talk to conservative Mormon men, they say, no, 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 don't worry, I got it. Because they're not going to admit weakness. Well, if he admitted weakness, I could just tell him, well, like, here's what you need to do and you'll be fine.
But they live a lie. Yeah, they live the lie of, I'm a Mormon who's not supposed to drink, but I do drink. But my wife doesn't know, but I lie to her. Like,
so don't live the lie. You know what I mean? Like, if he stayed busy, he wouldn't. Mormons have.
Is there an Oedipus complex though potentially here as well? Like
Oedipus is he doesn't want to be castrated. So once we start talking about castration, in Lacan, there's a gay man. I'm not accusing him of being a homosexual, but in Lacan, there's a homosexual man who drinks alcohol so he doesn't have to have sex with his wife, right? So you can see alcohol, like alcohol is used as a fantasy formation to prevent feeling like you're inadequate. And what I'm going to advocate is if you're inadequate, say, I'm inadequate, right? Like, so for me, I think I wrote an amazing book. You love it, right? But what you're better at than me is you have a much better social media presence and you have much better outreach, right? So in that genre, you're so much better than me. Okay, so that's my inadequacy. I'm admitting it to you. And together we're going to roll forward into a new synthesis, right? Yeah. So instead of covering over your inadequacy, admit it to someone. They'll either help you or they won't. If they won't, go find another person and then roll it forward. So whenever you see someone being a little bit too confident, they're covering something up. If they're holding frame a little bit too much, they're covering something up. So the other thing is their church, like it's like a Masonic situation. So who knows what kind of programming is in them? And, I've never been to the inside of that church. But you can feel that Mormons come from a similar mold. There's a lot of good Mormons. I think they make up a very good part of the American federal workforce. They do a lot of good, right? But it feels like they have very rigid understandings of gender. And unlike their church, who knows how to play the stock market, I think you know that, right?
Yeah, they have a lot of money.
So if he talked to his elders and they could tell him, they could put him on some game, right? So I guess that, like,
what's funny is he was part of what's called the Manosphere Mormon Mafia.
Oh my God.
And I'm serious, it's a real thing. It was 3 guys who were Mormons and still are, and heavily involved with Manosphere stuff. Ryan Mickler was one of them. Another was what's that guy's name? What was it? Order of Manliness?
Yeah.
Art of Manliness.
Okay.
It's a huge, like, very beta male, but very large masculinity kind of website, really old school. Brett McKay isn't it? I don't fucking know what his name was. I don't know. These are guys who are all Mormons and are heavily involved in, like, kind of LARPy beta male masculinity. But that's like the secret little mafia.
Well, if they're Mormon, they could have figured out deals with Mexico, with Latin America, right? They could have followed their church roots through Latin America, which is a developing economy, and I'm sure they could have figured out some kind of business, because there's a lot of businesses which are underdeveloped there, right? So if you're a Mormon, there's a path forward. You could roll that forward, right? But so I guess if there's a problem, there's internalizing the problem where you cover it up with, like, I'm a man, it's okay. And there's externalizing the problem, which is to say, I have a problem. What resources can I pull into myself? What can I do? How can I move? So I think Mormons
to deal with the problem, you mean?
To deal with that problem, yeah, or to create a new synthesis to feed resources into you and your family, right? So you're not going to solve your problem sitting where you are. Mormons, a lot of them are really good in business.
Yeah.
So and I've worked with some of them, and they're really good, and I was able to help out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe some really weird shit too, though. I mean, the timeline doesn't work out perfectly, but it's almost like Christianity and Scientology fucked and had a baby, and then Mormonism came out. They believe their God is like an alien, for example, who came from another planet, and when they die, they get to populate other planets with their kids, like literally other planets, like Saturn, Uranus, and stuff like that.
So there's Freemasonry, and Freemasonry is the religion of the United States. And so I think my belief is that Joseph Smith was some kind of Freemason, and then out in Utah, he decided to create his own religion using the Christian Bible, the Protestant Christian Bible, and Freemasonry, and he has some kind of blend. So all of this like space alien and Uranus, that's probably coming from Freemason, because I'm whatever. I don't. My bias against Mormons is I don't think they're the most creative people. So I think he linked things together, and he created a religion that allowed him to engage in polygamy, right?
Yeah,
Maybe that was the goal, because they're so big on polygamy. But I would say even if their religion is wacky, they do create very good, organized people, very productive people.
Yeah.
So even if I disagree with them religiously, I don't want to push them too hard, because I would argue kind of the ends justify the means, even with Uranus space aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Oedipus complex thing, though, comes to mind too, not just with that Mickler guy. I mean, becoming the alcoholic that his mother happened to fuck. Like, I think he had a stepfather after that too, if I read his biography right. And that guy was also an alcoholic.
Well, so the Oedipus complex is.
But hang on, my own father was an alcoholic drug addict, and I have two sisters who both married alcoholics or otherwise drug addicts. One of them's dead now, a fentanyl zombie. Now he's dead. And it's like, what are the odds that this is a coincidence? And the answer is fucking zero. Like, this is some sort of, replicating the behavior of what that they're familiar with.
I mean, it could be. What I would tell you is, if you look at the former Soviet Union, all of those countries, like the Warsaw Pact, when those men couldn't see forward, they all drank themselves to death. So my father's generation, like, if there's a lot of Eastern Europeans in Europe, they don't know their father because they all drank themselves to death. So when you see the drug addiction, when you see the alcohol, that means that the economy is declining and they're killing themselves out of the workforce because they don't see a future.
So that's what you see in America then too. Everybody blames the fentanyl on China, but you're saying it's more economic?
So the economic destitution brings them to drugs. If you had tons of money coming in, you wouldn't do fentanyl, because you're like, well, how do I make more money? How do I structure? Right? So when people fall into this nihilism, this hopelessness, that's when the drugs happen.
Yeah. What's funny about my brother-in-law, who morbidly funny. I mean, I don't hate the guy that much. He's dead from overdosing fentanyl. He used to crush it and snort it in pill form. His mom is worth like millions and millions of dollars. I mean, basically, he's like a son, husband, kind of mama's boy who grew up and never stopped being a mom's boy. But he never lacked for money because his mother had and still has a shit ton of money, like more than $10 million in fucking net worth. So that's an example to me of someone who was not economically destitute in that sense. Maybe in a personal sense, wasn't able to go out into the world and be effective. But so
another theory, let's say, I'm just going to throw theories because I don't know anything about them.
Sure.
Is when there's space, sometimes there's space where, like you and me came to this manosphere space, right? And in this manosphere space, you had an opportunity to create a convention. I had an opportunity to write for 10 years, right? When people don't have a space where they can try their new stuff, they can either go into a religious space or they can go into a drug space. So maybe he went to, maybe his mom, I'm just throwing ideas out. Maybe his mom's dominating the space so hard with her $10 million that he doesn't have enough room to exist. But if he's on fentanyl, he's in fentanyl world. And in fentanyl world, he feels unsplit and his ego feels complete, right? So that's back to Lacan's patient who was a homosexual, right? He doesn't want to have sex with his wife, but if he's drunk, then he can disassociate, right? So basically don't disassociate from your problems, charge them head on, and if you're not strong enough, go find some friends. Don't become a fentanyl zombie.
No, that's alpha male advice. I love it, man.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I've always advocated that too, just from a different philosophic perspective, the philosophy of objectivism, where the Russian Alyssa Rosenbaum, Ayn Rand, advocated for, that facing reality is always a good thing. I remember I argued one time, me and Rihanna Stone was bitching at me about this, saying sometimes you need to like avoid reality, basically. And I was like, how gay is that? You need to always face reality and face your problems head on.
Okay, so there are people, so I'm going to give you some Lacan in just a digestible form. In order to be successful, some people need a veneer of fantasy to sugarcoat it, right? So if you look at American military recruiting, you know, like the few, the proud, the Marines, right? If this guy's disassociated in his dress blue, you know, sword world while he's in a Fallujah hellhole, if that helps him get him through, great, right? If you look at the Mormons in Utah, if their religion gives them an emotional buffer for when they're shooting all the Indians, maybe that's what they need, right? And so if you look at contemporary America, there is no fantasy. Like, what does it mean to be an American right now? Nobody knows, right? So there's some people who they run off of drive, right? I think you and me run off of drive. If it's fucked up, like, let's go, right? But a lot of people need a fantasy. They need a veneer, right? Like, I can eat dry chicken breast, I'm fine. Some people need that flavoring. They need that flavoring of fantasy. And so for the bottom 80% of the population, what is the masculine role model, masculine fantasy that they can, like, who's the Rambo? Who's the Arnold Schwarzenegger? It doesn't exist. And now what's the most emergent form of gender that we're seeing is we're seeing Nick Fuentes gay cat boy, right? That is a gender identity. So those stories have to be pushed out because the 80%, okay, the top 20% can function off of drive, or I don't even know what percent, but the bottom needs a story, right? Or if you look at the Crusades, they had a story, or Iraq, they had a story, Afghanistan, they has a story, right? Weapons of mass destruction. That story was a lie, but as political leadership, you need to create that story. If you're a leader, you know that your some of your people, they can't handle the truth, and you have to lead that 80%, and you have to create a narrative.
Well, it's like putting a carrot in front of a donkey on a stick. I mean, you're saying these people need a carrot to go after.
They need a carrot. They need a carrot. So if you look at objectivism and rationalism and Kant, they would say, okay, let's look at how things work. But once you start getting into political power, you're going to have to start playing fucking games with people. You know, like if you look at your convention, right? If you wanted to hold your convention together, you would have to have some kind of overarching narrative for the members too. And two, you would have to finesse, obviously not Rollo, but the next Rollo into participating.
You mean
right?
seduce the speakers?
You would have to seduce them with some kind of narrative. And
there are other ways. I mean, you said I have an iron will, and I appreciate that, and I think that's true. And that's honestly how I did a lot of the work I did with 21 Convention. That's what drove it forward, this iron will. It wasn't this other stuff. Not that these things aren't useful or it can't be useful, but this is what actually pushed it forward through time. Just relentless, sheer fucking will, over and over and over again. But there's no way to cheat reality. I'll say that too. You have to do something to move it forward, and there's no actual shortcut to circumvention of whatever it's going to take to move it forward. I mean, there's different ways to do it.
If you're dealing with the mass has to be rolled forward. And you see this with the electoral cycle, or if you look at, let's say, an authoritarian country like in Eastern Europe, right? They constantly create new narratives to move the people forward. They can't function without a story of some kind. And when they're between stories, like if you notice, like there was the pandemic, right? But right when they unmasked everyone, they moved into Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right. And then this whole Ukraine thing, they're kind of forgetting about it. You can tell that they're going to load up the people with another story. So I think my job, and especially your job right now.
No, the Jew stuff is after that then.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's going to be the Jew stuff. And then But you can see how, like, you'll know that we're in control when people listen to our story. Right. And we were in control in 2016, and then Peterson and all these losers came, right? So it's going to come down to a big storytelling competition. So I would,
that's what my upcoming memoir is going to be. It's a story.
yeah.
It's a story of the manosphere, and it's a story of my life over the past 18 years. So we'll see if I can tell that story in a compelling way to do what you're saying. I think that I can, the same way I think you wrote an incredible book that really is the best distillation of manosphere wisdom I've ever seen by far.
What I would say is, like, when you look at, well, first of all, thank you so much. What I would say is, when you look through my book, there's pictures, and those pictures tell a story, and there's a strong aesthetic, right? So, what's good about you with the hat, like, you have an aesthetic, but people buy into an aesthetic long before they buy into facts. So any structure has, like, what is the packaging on a product? Like, think about your packaging. What's, like, Rollo's very dull with his packaging, right? So but the left is actually very, very strong. So how can we out angle, this center Kamala left with better aesthetics? If people come to us for our aesthetics, then they'll hold on to us for our truths.
Yeah, we got to build back better. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Yeah, she has this laugh. Oh my God. I don't. The Democrats, like, they have a lot of money. They should have some talented people. I don't understand why they can't create a half compelling propaganda.
Or like a new Obama. Yeah, Kamala's terrible.
I mean, there's some Obamas there. Like, I don't know why they can't package their lies. Like, I know they're lying and I know it's bad, but, like, where is the gift wrap? Like, give me some good packaging.
Yeah.
And they're not.
No, they wrap it in. The wrapping is literal communism. Like, we're going to take your patents, and we're going to take your property, and we're going to have price controls on the groceries. Like stupid shit.
I think what's weird is that no one wants price controls. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one is, like, I don't see the left wanting price controls. I don't see anyone voting for price controls. So it just feels like they're just going to be running everything straight into the ground for the sake of running everything into the ground, Like, they're not.
Ayn Rand had something she called the philosophy of the zero. And she basically said that all these different left-wing ideologies, and even some of the stuff on the so-called right, they worship the zero. And the ultimate zero, the ultimate equality, they're all egalitarians. They want equality to the infinity and beyond. The ultimate equality is death. And her view is that that's why everything is zero. Like, how much masculinity do they want in the culture? Zero. How much femininity do they want? Zero. How much traditional nuclear family structures do they want? Zero. Everything goes to zero as kind of the end goal. That was her view, if I'm paraphrasing it correctly.
Well, there's a view from Dugin, who's very close to Vladimir Putin, that the Democrats want a transhumanist agenda or a post-human agenda. So if they can drive humanity into zero, they can replace everyone with robots.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And so maybe they're going to doom juice everyone. Step 1, step 2, destroy fertility. And then everything's going to be automated. So
the robot's a perfect slave, and genocide gets all the useless eaters out of the way. So I think you're onto something with that.
So that's like a Dugin position. I can't really understand what the Democrats want or what their win condition is. I mean, the Republicans make sense that, okay, they want to stabilize. They want to keep corporate profits up and stabilize the middle class as much as they need to. And so that makes sense to me. But, like, if we even think back, like, what did Hillary Clinton want?
She wanted power. She wanted, to stroke her own ego to the end of time.
Like, if I'm a liberal woman,
a lot of alcohol too.
What am I going to get for voting for Hillary Clinton?
You get to break the glass ceiling. It's her turn, bro.
But, like,
it's always her turn.
Like, okay, like, if I own a car dealership and I vote for Trump, I get more money because I'm taxed less. Like, okay, good, right? Like, that makes sense. That's coherent. But if I'm a liberal woman living in New York City, like, what do I get? I don't, nobody really knew. She was just kind of like bitching her way into, and I really don't understand. Like, they have a whole political party. Like, why can't they come up with something cohesive? And when I was in law school, my California law school fed right into
You have a law
the
degree?
Democratic. Yeah,
Wow, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. That's the book. So my whole thing is this: I went to law school, and I argued with my professors, bad, and they hated me, and they're like, "You're not gonna get a job as a lawyer. Like, go fuck yourself." And I'm like, "I will." And then I took my academic writing into the manosphere. Like, okay, let me use my legal research in order to start writing at a higher level. And then I was thinking, okay, well, since I'm a better writer than most of these people, I can fight my way to the top. But I didn't understand that there is a glass ceiling in the manosphere of Rollo, unironically, right? But to go back to the point, like, one of the girls that I studied with defended Weinstein for his abuse of women, and she's a Democrat and he's a Democrat, right? So, like, I kept digging into. I'm like, okay, like, I don't want to like argue, like, I don't want to have like a negative conversation with you. Like, can you like why Gavin Newsom? Like why? Like, please, like, why? Like, tell me why. Like what's your point of view? Like, I don't get it. And like, I think they get localized tax breaks. Like okay, like, my aunt is an oncologist. She votes Democrat, and all her doctor friends, they vote Democrat. In like Northern California, and one of the things that they did was to not pay property tax. They transformed their huge estate into a vineyard. So they planted grapes on their estate so they don't have to pay property tax.
You can do this in Florida too. You can have bees and cow, like even one cow, and you can shave a huge amount of property taxes off.
Right. So like, Democrats like always play games like that.
But you keep asking like why they're voting in a certain way or for a certain candidate, as if there's going to be a logical reason, and maybe it's just emotions. Like, they hate Trump and they get to vote for the other guy, the other chick who's not Trump, and they feel better that way.
It's part of their ego identity, I guess. And
why do blacks keep voting for Democrats? The Democrats fucked them for 50 years and they keep voting Democrat.
When there was this polling place, it was called like 538. Yeah. What were they called?
538, Nate Silver. Yeah.
Okay, so I spoke to him actually back in 2016, and I was like, I looked at your polling data, because my undergrad's in political science, and you have black men voting for Hillary Clinton at the same rates as Obama. Why? You went to Stanford. Why? And I was on the phone with him. And Nate Silver, or one of his aides, he just didn't answer the question. And so it was a push poll. So they cooked the poll to get the results that they wanted. So I guess one of the reasons why I'm pushing you to do another convention or ramp up or to do more podcasts is the more powerful you are, the more powerful I am, the more access we can have to cool, powerful people, the more cool things we can learn. And
yeah, I'm with you on this front. There needs to be a lot done there, a lot of growing, a lot of pain, a lot of change you can believe in.
I mean, I would say that, like,
me and you talking is aggravating a lot of lesser alpha males of the manosphere. It angers them a lot.
I'm saying let's kick it up, because okay, yes, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be a lot of movement, but let's have that information feed into you and me instead of shit rolling. Yeah. Let's get that audience back so we can go start talking to our insiders. Like, for me, like, I think I didn't do this for money. You didn't do this for money. Mm-hmm. But the access that you get for being some kind of influencer is so cool. And like, I'm sure you learned a lot of your books from recommendations at your convention, right? And so those convention speakers flung you forward at an accelerated rate. Same thing for me. So, let's get into that dialectic. Let's start rolling forward. And I think we can meet really, really cool people and learn a lot.
Yeah. Now, before we close out the show, it's been an hour and 20 minutes. I want to talk a little bit more, or start talking a little more here about bio boomers. That's a term I'd never seen before reading your book, a bio boomer. Right away, I knew, I was like, this has to be the fat 300-pound boomers on a scooter at Walmart. This has to be the boomers on statins and blood pressure meds and like all this crap. But what is that was just my assumption. What is a bio boomer in your book?
So we could say that a person is conditioned by their economic environment and their social environment, right? But in the United States, people are so heavily medicated, right? So Lipitor fucks with your cholesterol and fucks up your hormones, right? So one of my ex's dads was on Lipitor and he like rambled around like a zombie. And then, alcohol, it comes from like Monsanto grain and it's very estrogenic, right? So you have to understand that I think you know who Foucault is a far left theorist, but
I don't know who that is.
He's like a postmodern French philosopher.
Okay.
And so there's stuff you're going to agree with, stuff you're not going to agree with regards to Foucault, but there's a biopolitic. And the idea is there's a politic at the level of, okay, let's argue to the best of our ability, rationally or in terms of rhetoric. But I can do another kind of politic, a biopolitic, where I biologically fuck you over, right? So if I want to get rid of the middle class, let me Lipitor poison all these boomers, right? Or we could remember remdesivir. It was this drug that will like kill your kidneys if you went to a pandemic ward, right?
Sounds like Ozempic now too.
Right. So through these drugs, they can medicate away, or definitely fentanyl, they can medicate away certain populations.
Or the doom juice obviously killed off a lot of old fat people.
Right. So there's doom juice. You could argue that's biological warfare. You could talk about, when you go to college, it's all about what's it called? Adderall and that birth control pill. That birth control pill makes women estrogenic and fat.
Oh, Levestranol is the one, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And then, so you can see that there's a suite of drugs that they can use to control a population. And so a bio boomer is a biological slave that's created through a certain biological process, right? So I can media indoctrinate you to ruin you, but I can also poison you through drugs. And I think Pfizer had a pill that they're like, it has a microchip in it, and if you don't take it, they know. So they're going to be pushing all sorts of stuff.
Well, you're saying you can media indoctrinate someone, or you can biologically indoctrinate them and control them through that way.
Right. And then if you talk to the conspiracy people, they can pulse certain frequencies at you through your 5G, right? That like Alexa is biased politically, right? Mm-hmm. So there's different kinds of warfare, and in the 5th generational warfare, information control is going to come into it, and increasingly these kinds of drugs. So that's the next frontier.
Yeah, plus mandates and stuff like that with doom juice. I mean, they really tried to push that really hard. Obviously, they don't mandate like cholesterol meds, but this stuff is aggressively pushed on people. Ozempic and the similar ones are the newest, the latest trend of shit that will destroy your kidneys and your organs and stuff.
If you look at Canada, they have a very liberal euthanasia policy where they'll just euthanasia, like Futurama euthanasia booth, right? Yeah. And that's another biopolitic. So what is a bio boomer? It's a certain psychological modality that's created through drugs. And when you look at Fox News viewers, on the other side of that screen is a bio boomer who is estrogenic from his alcohol and on Lipitor and on all sorts of Monsanto grains. So you have to understand.
And then they take the Viagra to jerk off to Tommy Lauren.
And then perfect, right? So you have to understand that some of the arguments we have, they can't be solved verbally. They're actually going to be solved nutritionally, right? So if I convince you to start eating more meat, or go buy meat from your farmer for some meat discounts, or go cook with ghee butter, me saying go cook with ghee butter is actually a political statement because it's going to make you less estrogenic.
Mhm.
So maybe some of our manosphere arguing has to move into that biological field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
thank
mean,
you
there
for
was a
bringing that
study
up.
that came out, I think, the other day. I saw, these conservatives on Twitter bitching about it, talking about it, but basically it was like TRT or some sort of testosterone booster made people more right wing. Like naturally, the more testosterone you have, the more right wing you tend to be, and the lower your estrogen is. It was a bunch of, I think it was a bunch of employees at The Economist or something. They had their testosterone tested, and total counts were like under 200. All of them were under
Right.
like really, really low. And these are like millennial and Gen X dudes. Like these are not even old farts or anything like that. But the bio boomer too, is that also someone who is just completely dependent on technology to live? Like art, like a lot of people died of the coof, not just the doom juice, but the
Sure.
actual pathogen. But as I see it, a lot of these people's lives were artificially propped up anyway by technology. They, with even just a literal scooter, like this person's 350 pounds, they can't walk, they can't get food without the scooter. And
Okay.
the
So,
scooters are propping up their whole fucking life.
well, so, okay. Feminism is propped up by what? Birth control, abortion, student loans, right? So if you want to end, let's say, Western liberal feminism, if you took away the abortion, the student loans, right, it would be over because she wouldn't like if a 20-year-old ran around having as much sex as possible, she'd run out of money and should get pregnant. As soon as she's pregnant, she has to settle down with a guy out of financial necessity, right? So you
Mhm.
have to understand that a lot of these modalities that you're fighting with, they have an underlying economic cause, which is created by how banks give out loans, and they have a biological cause, right? So this whole transgender thing, right? That only started when they started giving out drugs in a certain way.
Hmm.
So a lot of the problems that we've like, you can argue with these people all you want, but to stop it, you have to go to these, more foundational levels. One of the reasons why people are afraid to leave the US is because if I'm a strong, independent woman, right, I can't have that same support that my lifestyle is dependent on, right? If I'm an obese American, how am I going to be an obese American in Mexico if all the staircases are narrow and spirally and there's no Americans with Disabilities Act, right?
There's no
So
scooters. You need a scooter.
there's no scooters,
Yeah.
and instead of like a chill ramp, it's just a spirally staircase made by the Spaniards in like the 1700s. So a lot of the behaviors that you and I find repulsive actually are mediated architecturally, economically, and in terms of drugs.
Yeah. I really like this discussion. I never thought about it this way, but biological indoctrination is a really good way to articulate or encompass all these different issues. Pills,
There's a
scooters.
bio. We can also talk about architecture, right? So
Yeah.
how are spaces constructed to create certain kinds of behaviors? So when you have a left-wing mayor, he's going to create spaces for fentanyl, gender exploration time, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Orlando, where I used to live until recently, it was notorious where there's a huge homeless, problem. It's mostly men, but some women too.
sure.
And this used to not be the case. Even 10, 12 years ago, there was like no homeless people. The mayor, though, what the hell is his name? Forget his name. He's been mayor for like 20 fucking years. But all of a sudden, 10, 12 years ago, he started like importing and incentivizing homeless people to come to downtown Orlando. And now it's just like the homeless zombie apocalypse of fentanyl, druggies and stuff. And it's a total shithole now. It's like really, really bad.
So when you look at George Soros, where George Soros is really smart, he has a political agenda and he's an investor, right? So what he figured out is what's the least amount of money I can spend to get the outcome that I want, right? So if I get a district attorney, I could get favorable prosecution, right? If I can get a mayor, I can create a fentanyl gender discovery zone, right? So I
It was
I
it was really smart going after all the DAs and like low level mayor kind of stuff.
he's like in that sense he's a genius, but the right like you don't see Peter Thiel being like, let's make a town square where small shops can whatever create a culture, and in the middle there's a Christmas tree, right? Like there's if the left knows how to weaponize capital to get what it wants, but the right, despite saying I'm a capitalist, okay, you're a capitalist, fine. How are you going to use your capital to push the social values that you want, right? Like if you like Christian values, that means you need to have a Christmas tree, right? So if you have a Christmas tree, that people have to be at a mall around your Christmas tree, right? So the American capitalist right doesn't use their money to push social values in the US.
They don't use any of the resources, not just money. They don't want to do anything to push something forward in the US.
Right. So they're going to go to the Republican convention to get tax breaks and have sex with men afterwards because they're all homosexuals.
Yep.
But I feel like where the left is strong is they have a social agenda and they will use their money to get it, whereas the right just wants tax breaks.
Yep.
So
you said it in your book, actually. The New Conservative Woman, for example, just posts, bi-weekly booty pics on Instagram.
And that's conservative, right?
That's conservative, yeah.
She's liberal if you see the inside of her butthole.
Yeah.
So the conservative woman is just the liberal woman of 10 years ago.
Yep.
So
dude, I can't tell you how many fucking Trump voting women there are who are just raging feminists. They fucking hate my guts too. And these are like extended family and stuff. They can't stand, because to them I'm the ultra right wing fascist, right? Even though we align on Trump and this and that, like, they can't stand the fact that I rub it in their face that feminism is a radical left-wing ideology, and you are a feminist, and you voting for Trump doesn't really mean jack shit. Well, you're a fucking feminist and you're a leftist.
Well, okay, so you can argue that feminism is a right-wing ideology because by destroying the bourgeois family, I can sell more shit to you, right? Like, because the Rothschilds funded feminism, right? So I could argue that. I think the reason why your family find you grading is because she has an ego identity. She identifies in a certain way, right? And you're saying, well, haha, you think of yourself right wing, but you're still haha a feminist, and look at your values, right? And you're right. But if she was to absorb that, okay, so like what clothes does she buy? Because her whole wardrobe is conservative woman, and she bought conservative woman, right? There's a consumer identity of I am what I buy.
For the booty pics on Instagram.
Right. So there's a conservative booty pic bikini that they can buy, right? So if you assault them right in the ego identity, they either have to push you away or say, you know what, I am left wing. Let me buy left wing clothes and get a nose ring.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this interview. I love talking to you. We'll keep digging through. I'll keep showing you interesting stuff. Yeah, and this is an amazing collaboration. Really, really grateful.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. It's been just over an hour and a half, so I guess we'll wrap up.
Amazing.
But I love it.
Time.
Guys, make sure you buy his new best-selling Manosphere book, The Pillars of Wisdom. Get your copy right on his website. Big fat book. Learn everything you need to know being a man in it. So thanks, man. We'll talk again soon. Next time we'll talk about phone-tarded sluts.
Amazing.
And your views on that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye.
See you. Thanks for watching too, guys. Peace out.